Okay, we're starting Kufi Beis, Halacha Beis. Yesh Mekom Misham Kilim B'Davar. Last week we had that there's an issue of Pas Akum. So now the Mechaber says Yesh Mekom Misham Kilim B'Davar. There are people who are Meko. And Sif Beis.
You didn't know anything about the Ramah, about the Pas Hadosh and Pas Kitnis?
Right, because we're that question of whether those things are or not, whether, do you mean is whether that thing should be Oil Shulchan Lachem? Which part of the question?
Yeah, whatever.
For Bishlag. We'll leave that to Kufi Gimel. What did you say?
Yeah, fine.
It's just in passing, okay. So V'loichem pas minachtem ha'v'kachavim. They buy bread from a non-Jewish baker. The makom she'en shem nach Yisroel. If there's a place where there's no Jewish baker in that town, then they shehi shas adchak. There's a shas adchak, so there's somech, and they buy pas, what we call pas paltar. He calls it pas minachtem. And the Ramah says v'yeshem that feel v'makom shpas Yisroel matzu yishari. That even in a case where there is pas Yisroel available, still you're allowed to buy the pas from a paltar of Ikacham. Okay, we're going to stop here in the middle of the din, but we'll emerge Hashem next time. Okay, so now what is this going on in this din? So the before we actually get to the din itself, I found the Gemara about pas Yisroel or pas Akum, whichever one you want to call it, is very unusual to my mind. The Mishnah says that a whole bunch of things are asur, a whole bunch of things that belong to Goyim are asur, pas and shemen and wine, a whole bunch of things are asur. Not wine is in the previous Mishnah, a whole bunch of things are asur. And the Gemara starts with the Gemara about pas Akum. There's one Gemara about it, basically, and the Gemara says, this is how the Gemara starts. Don't think that Bezdin was not to this issue. It starts off with like a guilty conscience. Like don't think it's mutter. Don't think, what do you think like that? It's like a very unusual way. It doesn't say. It says no dinim. In fact, we'll see maybe next week the Torah is medayik that the dinim of pas Akum are many blot later. But the Gemara says is don't think that it's mutter. What does the Gemara mean? And then the Gemara taka comes out a bunch of people who say that maybe taka is mutter. Maybe there is a heter of pas, and we'll see more about that in a second. The Gemara starts saying that maybe the gzeira that there was is not so asur anymore. That Mishnah that says that it's asur, maybe it's not so true. And there's a bunch of different sheets in the Gemara. If you look at the Yerushalmi on that Mishnah, and it's Yerushalmi and Shabbos also says there are different Gersois in that Yerushalmi, but according to many of the Gersois in the Yerushalmi says that the gzeira of pas Akum was taken back. Okay, that's a shaila in exactly what the Ger says, but there's a Yerushalmi that maybe says that they took back the gzeira of pas Akum.
Already pas Akum?
Excuse me?
So
it depends on the Ger. I'm not talking about no, they took it back. They took off the Isser.
Right.
They were right. What the details are not good. That depends on the Ger. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But the Yerushalmi says something about taking it back. And the Gemara says, then the Gemara a little bit later in the Babli says a little bit like this. It says there was a group, I forgot who it was, a bunch of people who said their bezin sat down and took off the Isser of Shemen Akum. There used to be an Isser called Shemen Akum in the Mishnah. Okay. So he says, so they took off the Isser of Shemen Akum. So they says, let's go and be mater the Isser of Pas Akum also. They said, you know what? If we can be matter this or pas Akum, what are they going to say about us? We matter all these surim. How is it going to look? So they decided not to be matter it. Okay, but that's the kind of the way they were looking at it. They were about to do it, and they said it's not going to look good. So they didn't do it. So the Kashrus is this. The Ran is the Kashrus on this. He says, what's going on? We have a rule that once a bezin makes it that another bezin is not allowed to be vatl like Torah unless the gotim and the b'chacham of minion. You're not allowed to just be vatl. We can't get up and say, we decided that the Isser, I don't know, some Isser that was made 1,000 years ago, Venus Akum. We had enough of it. We don't want that Isser anymore. We can't just get rid of an Isser. So how can it be that they could just? The Gemara says maybe they were vatl. The Yerushalmi says they were vatl. The Bavli says they were thinking about being vatl. What's going on here? So the Ran says that there are three levels in the way a gzeira could be. He says if you have a gzeira that was created, and you didn't follow it, he's Pasha B'Rov Yisrael, then that gzeira cannot be taken back by any bezin, even if they're greater than the original bezin. Okay? Even if it's godly menu, he brings a raya from a Gemara about Yud Chestavar, that even if the bezin is greater, if it's a gzeira that's spread through Klal Yisrael, you can't take it back no matter what. The second is, if you have a gzeira which is not accepted by people just didn't take to it. But it's something that's within reason that they could have taken it. Within reason that they might have accepted it, but they never caught on, and people never took that gzeira. So that's the gzeira that has to be can only be taken back by a bezin which is godum men b'chacham minyan. As it is, it stands. The only people who could take it back is someone who's as great or greater than the people who made the gzera. And the lowest level is if you have a gzera that was never accepted by Yidden. And it wasn't accepted because it's not realistic. They just couldn't do it. It was too hard. It wasn't Roiv Hatziv Yochel Amid Boy. They just couldn't pull it off. That gzera it stays in place, but any Bezdin in the world can take it off. Okay, I guess you have to be representative of some group. I guess you can't have three guys get together at Stiebel one day. But any Bezdin that represents, I guess, some kind of meaningful Bezdin can take off that gzera. They don't have to be called the men of Chachman.
Which is what's the third category?
The third category is that it was not accepted by Yidden, but it was not accepted because it just wasn't Lamais. It was too hard for them. They weren't able to do it. It was just too hard. So therefore, let's say Shemin. The reason why they took of the gzera Shemin is because it was just people had never really taken to that gzera. They never accepted it, and they didn't take to it because it was too hard. It wasn't.
Does he bring a proof for this?
Well, his proofs are that the Gemara here says they took off the gzera Shemin. They would take off their pas. There's another Gemara that says that the gzeras of Yud Ches Davar, nobody could take them off no matter what. And we have this rule that says that there are gzeras that a bezin that's called the man of Chacham Minyan can take it off, but a lower bezin, a bezin who's not as great, can't take it off. So we have these three different types of gzeras. So he's telling you which one fits into which. He's putting into place, but he has three different Gemaras telling you how you take off a gzera, so to speak. Okay? So now, Tosha says on our Gemara that talks about taking off the gzera says, what do you see from the fact that the people were thinking about taking off the gzera and pasakum? Right? They said they were going to take it off. They decided, no, it won't look good if we take it off. So you see, it must have been the kind of a gzera that had not been accepted by Yidden, and they weren't yochlamid by. Because had it been accepted by Yidden, or had it was a gzera that the tzibur could have done, then they wouldn't have been able to. The people in the Gemara weren't as great as the ones who made this gzera. They couldn't have taken it off. Elamai, you see that it was a kind of gzera that was not accepted, and it was not a gzera that people could really handle, and therefore Taisa says the reason why he doesn't in as much detail. I'm putting the Taisa and the Ram together, but Taisa says it was a kind of gzera that could be taken off, okay, which according to the Ram means because people didn't accept it, and it was not realistic for people to do. It was too hard. So Taisa says therefore the reason why nowadays in his times no one is machmir on pasakum is because some bezdin along the way must have taken it off. We see from the Gemara that it was open. It was like ready to be taken off by anybody. It was the kind of gzera that any bezin could get together. The seriously bezin could sit down and say, "We're taking off the gzera of Pasach." Any bezin could have done that. So if any bezin could have done that, Tosha says, "How come we don't do it now?" It must be that some bezin must have actually, in fact, done that. We don't have a record of it. And there's Yushalmis and Bavlis who keep talking about it, who talking about maybe they're taking it off, they're thinking that they're all kinds of ideas like that. So Tosha says it must have been that some bezin must have taken it off, and that's why no one's machmir on Pasach. That's what Tosha says. Okay, so this is where we sort of get our feeling for...
Where is this?
This Tosha is on Lamed Ham base. It's right there on this Gemara. It's Lamed Ham base, not Avodah Zarah. So Tosha says that obviously someone took it off. Okay, now, before we get into the different shittas as to what was taken off and, what happened to the gzera, you have to, just to put into perspective, the reason why this gzera, everybody speaks out, the reason why this gzera was possibly taken off or partially taken off or something happened to this gzera of Pasakum is because of two things, okay? One, and they are that bread is, two related things. Bread is such a staple food. People, mamas lived on bread. And also, the Yidden didn't have control of bakeries. You didn't have a choice to open up Tel Aviv bakery and make your own bread. Okay, it was under government control, whatever we'll say. The person who was allowed to own the bakery was not a Yid. He had no responsibility to let you come in and stoke his fires or do whatever you wanted to do to his things. So the Yidden were stuck. There was no way to get to bread, and bread was such an important food. Therefore, that's why we're even going to talk about that. There were people who talk about getting off the gzera, as opposed to, let's say, bishul akum. Bishul akum, first of all, is not such an important food. There are other things to eat, and you make food yourself. You didn't go every time you wanted to eat a piece of...
Yeah, people make their own bread.
I don't know why. I don't understand why. I don't understand the... I don't understand. So I don't understand the details of it. Why did they make regular foods? But I'm not sure.
Maybe they didn't sell flour in the supermarket.
I don't understand. But whatever it is, the control of the ovens, everyone's talking about how the Goyim controlled the ovens, and people needed to have bread. So because of that, that's why it was so difficult, and that's why we're talking about that people considered, or they did, or possibly, or partially, took off the gzera. Yeah, but it's because bread has this special, or we call pas, has these special properties. Okay, now, so there are, who knows, I don't know how, I can't count. There are many, I'm going to tell you like 5 or 6, but there's many shittas as to what happened to the Gzeira Pas Hakum. There was a Gzeira, Pas Hakum was Asher, and now what happened? Where did the Gzeira go?
Paltar and Vice, where is that?
We're coming to that, okay? So the chiluk between, I actually about to say that. The Gemara, our Gemara, the Bavli, says, in one of its variations of what might be mutter, the Gemara itself has 2 or 3 shittas, says that maybe the pas of a palter, a baker, might be mutter, and the reason why maybe the reason of a palter should be mutter is because we know that the whole gzeira of pas hakum is because of chasnas. If you'll eat his bread, you'll get friendly with him, and that might lead to intermarriage. Okay, so that's the reason for the gzeira. So if in a case of a palter, the baker, you have no warm feelings towards the baker. You don't care to the baker for the fact that he gave you a piece of bread. He's not giving you bread because he's your friend. He's giving you bread because he's running a business. He takes 20 loaves of bread, and anyone can come buy one. So the fact that you got a loaf of bread from him doesn't cause any kirva. And therefore, in that case, there's no svara for there to be an Isser Pas Hakum. In fact, there would have been an Isser Pas Hakum, but when they were taking back the Gzeira, or whatever, we'll see in a second, when they were undoing the Gzeira, that's the case that was the, so to speak, the easiest to take off, because that was the case that had the least, the whole time for the Gzeira didn't apply in that case. So if we were choosing which to take off, that had the least reason to be Asr, and it had the most benefit to make it mutter. Because the benefit that we needed was people had to be able to go to the bakery and buy bread. So the need was for a palter, and palter had the least case of chasnas, of the whole reason for the Gzeira was there. So between those 2 reasons, the Gemara says maybe palter is mutter. Now the Gemara says another thing also. The Gemara says maybe basada it's mutter. Another one that's talking to the Gemara is that maybe if you're out in the middle of no place, okay, you're just like, in the middle of Yupitzville and you need some food to eat, Rashi says it's such an unusual case, it's not going to lead to chasnas. You meet a guy in the street, you say, oh my God, I don't know the guy's, Mashgiach rolls into town at 11 o'clock at night, he needs something to eat, and he meets a guy, and he says, could I have a loaf of bread? He gives him some bread, so that's not going to lead to kirva, so that's another side of the Gemara that might be mutter. Okay, but the idea of palter is in the Bavli, it might be in Yerushalmi also. Which is what we're saying over here, that there's a case that palter is mutter, is because the palter has, the time for the Gzeira doesn't apply. Since the time for the Gzeira doesn't apply, it's the case that's the easiest to take the Isser off of. It's the case that has the least reason to be Asr, so the most, okay. The Rambam holds, so now let's go through some of the more first extreme shittas. The Rambam, if I understand correctly, holds that the Gzeira is as is, no changes. And others say exactly the opposite, that because it was so hard for people to hold up to this Gzeira, the entire Gzeira was taken off. Not just parts of it, and not just palter, the whole thing was just thrown out. Just like Shem and Akum, no one is machmir on Shem and Akum, so also the whole Gzeira Pas Hakum was taken off. And another, like, in between sheet is that in cases where there's no Jewish bread around, in that case the whole Gzeira goes off. Okay, and that's going to be that shita, that if there's no Jewish bread around, you could eat almost anything, that's in Sivches. We're going to get to that later. I think that's not what the Mechaber and the Ramah are talking about. The 2, like, middle shitas, which is we're most familiar with, are the Mechaber and the Ramah, which are, one sheet is that since people needed to have bread, so in cases where there's no pas, palter, shel Yisroel available, then you're allowed to eat pas, palter, shalakum. Okay, you're allowed to eat from a not Jewish baker if there are no Jewish bakers around. If there's a Jewish baker around, then you're not allowed to. That's like sort of addressing the specific need. If you don't have a palter Yisroel around, then you're in a city that only has a not Jewish baker, then you can eat from the pas palter, that's the Mechaber shita. But if there is Jewish bread around, you're not allowed to eat the pas palter shalakum. That's the Mechaber shita. And the Ramah shita is that since there was this great need for people to eat pas, people couldn't handle not being able to eat pas from goyim. Therefore, they took off the gzeira. There's no gzeira of pas, palter shalakum in any case. Even if there is palter shal Yisrael available, it doesn't make a difference. It's always mutter. You can always eat pas, palter shalakum. Okay? So the Mechaber says you can eat it when you need to, and the Ramah says you can eat it in all cases. Because of the need, you can eat it in all cases.
What's the basis of the Mechaber? You can eat it when you need to. He says that because Shas Chag you know the choice, or because he said that's how the Gzeira went?
You shouldn't show it, but you have in the book. I was about to say that. Okay, I was about to say it. 2 for 2. So the Shach says, Pshat is like this. The Shach says, that not that I could say that this reads so easily into the way the Beis Yosef brings it, but the Shach says like this. He says, I'm going to answer the Beis Yosef's kasha like this. The Shach says, the Mechaber and the Ramah are arguing have like a sort of a base argument that they're not saying, which is like this. The Mechaber holds the Gzera was never taken back. The Yisroel Pas stands in its place. It's a kind of a Chachamim let you off b'shas adchak. A guy is sick. We matter certain Yisurim D'Rabbanan. If a guy is sick, the Chacham would let you do it. So here they made like a sort of a permanent, long-term dispensation. If you're stuck, you're in a place that has no Pas Yisrael, fine, you could go ahead, you could eat Pas Paltar. So it was like since you're stuck, we're letting you off the hook. That was it was what?
It was like never part of the
No, it was part of the Gzera. Just like if you go to the Rav and say, look, I'm sick. Can I take this medicine? Can I do this thing? He would say, it's only this with Rabbanan, and for certain things we could be makel. So it was.
That's built into that.
Well, it's sort of like right. It's like sort of like like a traditional way to answer a shayla of an issur d'Rabbanan. But in this case, it's made permanent in that it's that here it says in the Shulchan, if you don't have a paltar shalakim, you can eat from paltar shalakim, you can eat from paltar shalakim. Right? It's sort of made permanent, but it's within the regular rules. That's what you mean. It's like in the regular rules of what do you do with Yisroel D'Rabbanan? And Yisroel D'Rabbanan is a little more kal. A person is stuck. He could be matter in certain cases. That's how the Mechaber holds. And the Ramah holds no. The Ramah holds that because of the doichak of not being able to have bread, therefore the Gzera was taken back, or partially taken back. Taken back to the extent that in a case of a paltar, you're allowed to eat it. Since there's no kirva there, there's no real reason for the Gzera. So in that case, they took it back. So took it back means it's not only mutter because I'm stuck. Even if I'm not stuck, if I like Arnold's bread better than Telvid bread, if Arnold's bread and Telvid bread are both available, and I choose Arnold's bread, go ahead, it's no problem. If I like it better, it's going to be a later din. Okay, that's a later din. Okay, but if they, I don't even know what's kosher anymore. But if you want to choose one of them, you could choose one of them. You don't have to have any excuses to do that. Okay, now so that's within the shittas. Now the next shach says 2 points. That's what I want to talk over here. Drop that. I'm going to say them out of order. His second point is that even though the Ramah says that if Pas Paltar Shalakum is mutter, even if you have Pas Yisrael available, the Shach says Miu Nira that it's a good idea to be machmir. Okay? He says it's a good idea to be machmir and not be simultaneous on what the Ramah said. The Ramah said you could eat Pas Paltar Shalakum even if there's Pas Yisrael available. The Shach says, Miu Nira it's better to be machmir for the Mechaber Shita, and the simple, here's what I'm going to say why. And the simple understanding for what he's saying is that what does he back up a second. The Shach says he means to say it's to be machmir for the Shita Samachaber, not to be machmir to say to always eat Pas Yisrael. It's machmir for the Shita Samachaber that when Pas Yisrael is available, you should eat the Pas Yisrael. And you sort of get the feeling that what he's saying is that I'm only telling you to be machmir in cases when there's Pas Yisrael available. So this is not a very difficult cheetah to be machmir for. It's like, come on guys, it's very easy. The Mechaber only holds you have to be machmir when it's available. So it means if you go, you're deep in Wisconsin and there's no Pas Yisrael available, I'm not telling you to be machmir there. I'm only telling you if you're on Davan, you could just as well go to Tel Aviv, so buy the bread there also. So it's like sort of like, come on, it's so easy to be machmir for the cheetah of the Mechaber. It's sort of what he's trying to say. Okay, now, this is the Shach. The Shach says, he says, Miu Nira, that you should be machmir for the cheetah of the Mechaber. That's what he says, and I'm understanding. The way he sounds it is like it's like the whole shittas hamachaber is only mechayev you to do it in cases when you can. So what's the big deal? You could do it anyway. You're looking at two packages. One is Pas Yisrael and one is not Pas Yisrael. Like why not? Like what's the mechaber would hold you should do. The Ramah holds you don't have to. But why not do the shittas mechaber? Okay, now the Shach then says a second thing. He says it first. The Shach says another thing, which is if you look in Hilchos Asher Semei Tshuva, Yom Kippur or whatever it is, it says over there. That during Asher Semei Tshuva, there are people who are makel about Pas Akum should be machmir during Asher Semei Tshuva. That's what it says. The implication from our Shach, and even more so,
Akum or Paltar?
Oh, so even more so, it's about to say, even more so the Mishmur over there has the mashmos, that he means to say is the people who during the whole year are makel about Pas Paltar, like the Ramah, should be machmir like the Mechaber during Asher Semei Tshuva. Okay? I mean, not to say that they should only eat Pas Yisrael during Asher Semei Tshuva, but that during Asher Semei Tshuva they should do like the Mechaber who says that where it's available to have Pas Yisrael, they should choose that. Am I making sense? Okay? Not that you should just automatically eat Pas Yisrael, but where it's available, which is what the Mechaber holds. If it's available Pas Yisrael, you should eat the Pas Yisrael, and we'll see more in the next bunch of dinim what it means available. What does that mean to say that if it's available? Okay. Now, what's the reason for following the sheet Samachaber during Asheres Mitzvah. What's the point? Where does it come from, such a thing that during Asheres Mitzvah you should try to be machmir for the sheet? Okay, so the Torah in Hilchos Asheres Mitzvah, whatever it is, or Hilchos Rosh Hashanah, brings it from Yerushalmi, which is not talking about Pas Yisrael at all. The Yerushalmi says that there was a Indian that for 7 days of the year you should eat your chulin b'taira. Okay, most people are not makbet to eat chulin like truma with the chumras of truma. It's a good thing that for 7 days of the year you should eat chulin b'taira. And what are those 7 days? What are those 7 days? Those are during the days of Asheres Mitzvah. Okay, so and the Torah says. And the Torah says that nowadays, I guess it's like no one even dreams of eating chulin b'taira. I guess that's like sort of like where it's coming from. So what we should do is those who are making a pas palter should eat pas Yisrael. Okay, it should be machmir for the sheet samachar.
Oh, the Torah's not saying that's Pshat in Yerushalmi?
Yerushalmi says chulin b'taira. I don't think he's saying it as
See that when he's interpreting it
Okay,
as
I'm getting to that in a second. I'm getting to that in a second. So I was waiting you to say that. So I'm getting to that in a second. Okay. So the Torah, I don't think that it says it in Yerushalmi, and I don't think he's reading it to Yerushalmi. I think that he's just saying, and like for us, we should do this thing. If I understand it correctly, I'm not sure. I think that's what he says. So now I just want to tell you what some people say nowadays. I want to put together the two parts of the shach. There are people who follow what the shach says, that they follow the Shitza Mechaber all year round. All year round, they follow the Mechaber that where Pas Yisrael is available, that's what they eat. They try to do like the shach, that where it's available, they eat it. So now, what's going to happen when it comes to Asher Shemei Tshuva? Okay? So those people are trying to be more careful and be more religious, more sincere during Asher Shemei Tshuva. Well, if all year round they follow Shitza Mechaber, what are they going to do during Asher Shemei Tshuva? Well, they can eat chulin b'taira, they can do that, but if they're not going to do that, what are they going to do during Asher Shemei Tshuva? So the official thing that it says in Shulchan Aruch is, if you're making a pas palter, then be machmir like the mechaber pas palter. Well, what am I supposed to do if I'm the guy who eats pas, who's machmir like the mechaber pas Yisrael all year round? What should I do during Asher Shemei Tshuva? So you can do tshuva,
You have to do something.
chol Yisrael, you can eat yashad, you could be machmir b'dom l'chaveroi, I don't know, you could be nice to your children, you can do 100 things. But I'm just saying is that, so some contemporary poskim say like this. If you or year round are machmir the shittas of the mechaber, that when Pas Yisrael is available, you should eat only Pas Yisrael. During Asher Shemei Tshuva, you should bump yourself up a higher level, which is that even if Pas Yisrael is not available, you should only eat Pas Yisrael. Okay, that's not, I don't believe that that's the din of what it says in Taf Reish Gimel. In Taf Reish Gimel it says, you should be machmir for the shita of the mechaber. But if you're machmir like the shita of the mechaber all year round, so now what do? And if it's too hard for you to be nice and not speak Lashon Hara, or be nice to your neighbors, so you got to pick something else. So for you, that thing is, then people have said it, so that you should choose is to be machmir on Pas Yisrael, even when Pas Yisrael is not available. Okay, to not eat pas palter even if pas is not available, which is not the shitza mechaber. It's not a day that's even brought in Shulchan Aruch. So that is the same. So what I'm trying to make the point is that although there are people who say, contemporary person who says, during Asher Shemei Tshuva you should only eat pas Yisrael, even when it's the pas palter, even when pas Yisrael is not available. I mean, you should not eat pas palter at all. I don't think that they're trying to say that that's what the mechaber says in Taf Reish Gimel, but they're trying to say it's the same feeling that the mechaber is giving across, which is you should be more careful about things. During that time, he said to be machmir like the mechaber. If you're like machmir like the mechaber, like all year round, you got to find something else to do. And therefore, people have taken to only eating pas Yisrael all year round. And we'll see in the coming dinim that the sheet of the mechaber, if being machmir for the mechaber or not the mechaber, has limitations. I mean, I'm going to give you just as an example. If there's no such thing as pas Yisrael pretzels, okay, don't ask me where they need to be. Let's assume that they need to be, and there are no pas Yisrael pretzels available, that even the mechaber holds that you could eat pas palter pretzels. Okay, so I'm saying the sheet of the mechaber is not such a chomer to sheet. We'll see in the coming dinim that it's very limited, only in cases where it's really available. So and as Mamash will see, very available, then you could do it. Okay, now while I'm here, I'm going to mention two sort of opposite things. One is that the Torah and the Beis Yosef bring a sheet of the Go'anim, okay, which is not so well known. The sheet of the Go'anim who say that it's not Baruch Hashem, not well known. Who say Baruch Hashem because of the way we live. Who say that if a person has no bread available, that even then on Shabbos he is allowed to eat pas not pas paltar, pas balabayas. Okay, he's allowed to eat even pas balabayas because there are questions. This is at most a drabanan, and there are many who hold that the whole xer was taken off completely. And eating on Shabbos is also probably they're saying the deraisa. So on Shabbos, you should, if you don't have pas shel Yisroel available, you could even eat pas balabayas, even pas from a goy, from your goyish neighbor who baked you a loaf of bread. You could eat it on Shabbos.
And akum.
Mamash of an akum of a balabayas. He's not even a paltar. He's not even a baker. He's just of an akum. Yeah, a paltar. So that's one extreme. And I say Baruch Hashem. I mean, we don't live in any kind of dechak like that. That people are mamash like so have nothing to eat that they're holding by this level. Okay, that's why nobody brings it. Yeah, but the opposite, on the opposite extreme, is at the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos. Mishnah Berurah brings it tough men days. Mishnah Berurah brings Magen Avram, who says that l'kavod Shabbos a person should eat pas Yisrael on Shabbos. Okay, that's what he says. He's l'kavod Shabbos. You should on Shabbos you should eat pas Yisrael. Now, the Mishnah Berurah over there is not. So there are no diukim that I see there that this din of eating pas Yisrael on Shabbos is only like the machaber. If you just read the words, your implication is that on Shabbos you should only eat pas Yisrael no matter what. No matter what. Okay, that's the implication you get from reading the Mishnah Berurah. So my example before of pretzels, if there be no pas Yisrael pretzels available, then that Mishnah Berurah seems to be saying that you should not eat pretzels on Shabbos. Okay, that's what he seems to be saying. The reason why I think it's not correct is because where did this din come from that on Shabbos you should eat pas Yisrael? Where did that din? What's the makar to that fine idea that on Shabbos you should pas Yisrael? You know where it comes from? It comes from the Torah in Tafresh Gimel. Because the Yerushalmi says, for 7 days a year, you should be makbid and only eat chulin b'tayra, which we're saying means only eat pas Yisrael. Okay? So everybody says, hold on a second, guys. It's the Aseret Shemei Tshuva. There's supposed to be 10 days of Tshuva. Why are you telling me only for 7 days?
9.
So okay, we're not going to Yom Kippur. So what's 7 days? Why did Yerushalmi
like 8 out of 10.
Why
The 9 is like 8 out of 10. So you times that.
Why does the Yerushalmi say that you should do it only for 7 days?
Because obviously
On Shabbos and Yom Tov, you of course would be makbid for those kind of things. That's like, doesn't he have to tell you to do that? So that's the Magen Avram's kasha also. So why is it at 6 days? That's another kasha. So the Magen Avram says they were kasha period, they only had whatever. Okay, that's a different kasha. That doesn't make a difference. So that's another kasha. Why does it? So the Magen Avram says that the Yerushalmi that says, and the documentary is Maram is at this, that the Yerushalmi that says that you have to have, that for 7 days you have to be makbid is telling you, it's like sort of without even bothering, of course you know that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you're makbid to only eat chulin b'tayra or pas Yisrael, all those kind of things. So now, if the din of eating on Shabbos, eating pas Yisrael on Shabbos, comes from the same Yerushalmi, the same Torah that said that you should do it during Aseret Shemei Tshuva. And during Aseret Shemei Tshuva, the whole din is saying is to be makbid like the Shittas HaMachaber. So then, on Shabbos, when we have this chumrah to only eat pas Yisrael, it means like the Shittas HaMachaber. It's the same din. It's not a different din of being makbid. This din of being makbid on Shabbos is the same din that the Torah is saying in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah to say that on Aseret Shemei Tshuva you should be makbid. So Aseret Shemei Tshuva means do it during these Aseret Shemei Tshuva and on every Shabbos and Yom Tov. And then we just separated those din and put one over there, one over here, one in Tuf Ben Beis, and one in Reish Ben Beis, and one in Tuf Reish Gimel. But it's really the same din. So if the din in Tuf Reish Gimel is just to go like the Shittas HaMachaber, there it's more clear that he means to go like the Shittas HaMachaber than the din in Reish Ben Beis, that on Shabbos you pass this whole also means to say you should eat like the Shittas HaMachaber. That chumrah there is mahara to eat like the Shittas HaMachaber. Now
the inyan for Shabbos they explain is because more kaddish.
It's a covered for Shabbos that you should. I'm understanding it is that you should. Now I have to.
We're to make a chiluk between Yom Tov Rishon and Yom Tov Sheni.
Why should it make a difference?
Because I'm in Rabbanan.
Okay, maybe. I wouldn't think so.
Do to eat pas Yisrael?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I think
Now I have to tell you, if you look in Reish Ben Beis, there are other reasons to eat pas Yisrael. It has to do there are other reasons. Okay, it's other parts of the covet, but this part of it, that it's also the chumrah of pas Yisrael. It seems to me that since it comes right out of the same Yerushalmi and the same Torah of Tuf Reish Gimel of Hilchos Aseret Shemei Tshuva, it should also be that you only have to do it in a case when, like the Shittas HaMachaber, that if it's available, you should eat it, and if it's not available, then you can eat something.